Hi, welcome to my kitchen. My name is Sue. You know, the holiday season is upon us. It's fall. We're going to be celebrating Thanksgiving soon, and that's my favorite time of year. It's a wonderful time to give thanks for all the good things God has done for us this year. And sometimes we like just a little bit of variety for our Thanksgiving meals or our fall harvest meals. Now, pumpkin pie is the traditional American dessert for the fall season. But I've got just a little twist for you. It's a Greek pumpkin pie called Glyki Kolokithopita. Glyki meaning sugary, sweet. Kolokithopita, well, the pita part is easy. That's the pie. Kolokithi is the Greek word for squash. And pumpkin is a winter squash. So stay tuned and learn how to make this very interesting variation to pumpkin pie. Just a reminder, today's recipe and all the recipes that we've used on the show so far can be found on our website, Tweeton.com. Be sure to look us up. You'll find a way to email me, and I would really love to hear from you. And you'll find interesting links to other Greek sites that will give you information about the Greek culture and even more recipes. To make Glyki Kolokithopita, better known as Greek pumpkin pie, you need some pumpkin. You really need 2 large cans of pumpkin. However, I found these smaller cans on sale, and today I'm using 4 smaller cans. And it's got to be the 100% pure pumpkin, not the pumpkin pie mix that you can find sometimes in cans, but just the plain old pumpkin. For the filling, you also need 1 cube or ½ cup of sweet unsalted butter. You need some cinnamon for flavoring, some cloves for flavoring. For the filling, you need some ground walnuts, a cup of ground walnuts for the filling, and then 2 cups of ground walnuts for the Fillo part, but we'll get to that later. You need some golden raisins and some sugars for sweetening. Now this all makes up the filling. To add the really Greek touch, you need some syrup. And for the syrup, you need sugar and, of course, some honey. And, of course, in addition to the Greek syrup, you need the Greek Fillo dough. So you need 1 pound of Fillo dough, which you can find at your local grocery store in the frozen food section. And you need anywhere from a ½ pound to 3/4 pound of sweet unsalted butter. Melted, of course, so that you can brush it between the leaves of the Fillo dough. Just a few important notes about working with Fillo. Number 1, if you get it from your grocer's frozen food section, you do need to have it thawed. You can thaw it overnight in the refrigerator, or you can put it out on your kitchen counter for a few hours. But whichever way you decide, you must bring it to room temperature before you even attempt to use it. You cannot really use cold Fillo dough well. And the second really important thing is, don't you dare open this package until you have everything else in the recipe ready to go. Get the filling completely prepared. Get your butter melted. Get your pan out, the whole thing. Get everything ready to go before you open up the package, because Fillo dries out so very quickly. The first thing I want to do to get myself ready for the filling and also for the Fillo later on is get my nuts prepared. I have a package here of walnuts. It measures 2 cups, and I want to grind them just a little finer. These are already chopped, but I just don't think this is going to be good enough. So I want to grind them a little finer. And today I'm going to use 2 parts of walnuts to 1 part of almonds. And just a note, in any Greek recipe, whether it's a baklava or something like this, when the recipe calls for nuts, you can just choose whichever nut you prefer. Almonds, pecans, walnuts, all of one kind, or you could even combine. It just doesn't matter as long as it's a nice, good tasting nut. Here we go. Hold your ears. And this is just fine. This is the texture that I'm looking for. Now I want to get started on the rest of the filling. My nuts I've set aside, and I want to put in my pumpkin into a saucepan and cook it for a while over medium heat just to evaporate any excess moisture. So into the saucepan go all my pumpkin puree. I want to turn the heat up to just about a medium heat. I want to add my 1 cube of sweet unsalted butter. This will melt the butter and it'll just cook a little bit. And to this, to flavor up the pumpkin a little bit, a teaspoon of salt. And you may be asking yourself, why have unsalted butter if you're going to add salt? Well, it's really simple. I bought a pound of unsalted butter because that's what I needed for the Fillo. So I'm going to use that whole pound up somehow in this recipe. Since this needed a cube of butter, I'm using one of the unsalted cubes. So I just want this to heat up and cook for about 15 minutes. It's been 15 minutes. My pumpkin has been cooking. The pumpkin has lost a lot of moisture through evaporation, so it's thickened a bit, and it's got more of a cooked flavor. And that's all I need to do now. I'm just going to take it off the heat. To the cooked pumpkin butter mixture, I want to add all the other ingredients that are going to make this filling so tasty. First, I want a half cup of sugar. Now this isn't a lot of sugar, but remember, this is going to be a syrup-soaked dessert, so the filling doesn't have to be extraordinarily sweet. I also want to add a cup of the nuts that I have chopped. This will add some texture, interest to the filling. Okay, a cup of nuts. In addition, I want to add 1 cup of golden raisins. Now, if you use a little more golden raisins or a little more nuts, it's not going to make any difference. You don't have to worry about exact, precise measurements. Just come close. And to flavor all this, I want 1 full teaspoon of ground cinnamon and just a 1/4 teaspoon of ground cloves. Now the only thing I have to do is just mix it all up. Just be sure that you mix everything well and make sure that the cinnamon and the cloves are incorporated throughout the entire filling mixture, so there's no pockets of nuts, no pockets of all raisins, that kind of thing. You just want to mix it well. And this looks just fine. And all I want to do now is just set this aside. The filling is done. Next thing I want to do is get started on the syrup. For the syrup, I want 3 cups of sugar. Just going to put it in a saucepan. Three cups of sugar. To the 3 cups of sugar, I want to add a 1/2 cup of honey. This is a light honey syrup. Here's my 1/2 cup of honey. And finally, to this, I want 2 cups of water. Now what I want to do is just stir everything together, get it all blended, get the sugar completely dissolved, bring this up to a boil, and it needs to boil for anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. It needs to be thick. If I don't boil this, what will happen is the syrup won't be thick, and the phyllo dough that I've worked so hard on will become just soggy. So by boiling the syrup, getting it thick, getting some of the excess moisture out, it'll help sweeten things, but it'll also keep that phyllo sort of crispy too. Well, my syrup has come to a boil, so I'm just going to turn the heat down a little bit and let it cook for about 15 minutes. Well, the 15 minutes are up. The syrup has been boiling away. I stirred it every once in a while, scrape down the sides, and now all I need to do is just take it off the heat. One last step before I start putting everything together. I want to get my butter melted for the phyllo. And I'm going to start off with 2 cubes of butter. If I should need more, I've got more for backup. Into the microwave it goes. Okay, I'm ready to put this thing together. Before I even think about opening the phyllo package, I want to get this pan well buttered. So here we go. This is a special dessert, so you shouldn't skimp. It's not as though you're going to make this every day. This is really special, once a year occasion. So slather on the butter and don't feel bad about it. Okay, that's pretty good. I've done the bottom and the sides of the entire pan. Now, there are a lot of helpful hints out there for people working with phyllo. My favorite method is to just get started. All right, ready? These sheets of phyllo go into this pan. And this, this first sheet is nothing to brag about, but into the pan it goes. Because what would I do? Throw it away? That's ridiculous. So here's a huge empty space caused by this torn section, and in goes this. All right, that's good enough. And a little bit of butter just to make it glued to the bottom of the pan. Okay, this is looking better. This is more like it. And one thing, because we have a fairly liquid filling, I want to make sure that I build up the sides so that I can fold them over and enclose the filling. So I'm going to lay out these sheets of phyllo so that I have excess on each side, and I'll have to just alternate sides. Like this time I'm building it up on this particular side. Next time I'll build it up maybe here, here, or here. I want about 5 sheets of just phyllo and butter. All right, and I'm going to try and build it up over on the other side now. And what do you know, I did it. And when you're working with phyllo, don't worry too much about tears and that kind of thing. Eventually, if you use enough sheets, you'll cover up whatever tears there are, and you'll have a good solid base. Don't be afraid of it. It's really quite easy. It just looks hard, and it looks very spectacular when you're done making a dessert. Okay, that's about 5 sheets. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 5 more sheets of phyllo, but I'm going to add a sprinkling of walnuts between each layer. So here's my first layer, or sprinkling of walnuts. And part of what this is going to do, it's going to add a really interesting texture, and it's going to make a very nice sturdy base, keep the phyllo just a little bit crisper with, you know, the moist pumpkin filling and the moist syrup. So that's good. That's a nice sprinkling of nuts. And on to my next sheet of phyllo. All right, so there's a new sheet of phyllo, and just another layer of nuts, and more phyllo. But just because you're separating these sheets with nuts doesn't mean you don't need to butter. So be sure you put down a fresh sheet of phyllo. Every time you do that, you glob on the butter. One more sheet of phyllo until I put the filling on. That'll be 5 sheets of phyllo that have been layered with the ground nuts. All right, here's my last sheet of phyllo, and it's going to get the filling. Okay, just a little bit of butter, because we're putting the filling in here. A little bit of butter, and just a little bit of nuts. And now it's time to spoon in the pumpkin filling. And this stuff is pretty thick now. So I suggest that you spoon it in at even intervals so that when it's time to spread the filling out, you won't tear the pita. All right, now you want to just spread it as evenly as possible without damaging the phyllo. And you want to spread it to the corners and to the edges. It needs to be flat. There shouldn't be a big hump in the middle. And that's a pretty thick filling, as you can see. All right, now I'm just going to flatten it a bit. All right, so much for the filling. Now what I want to do is fold over those edges, those phyllo edges and sides that I've built up. So just fold them over, and you might need a little help from a knife to pry them from the edge of the pan, because they're glued there because of the butter. Fold them down, fold them over. Some of the edges are real dry and they break off. That's okay. Just fold it down. What you want to do is just envelop or encase the entire filling. This isn't really runny, so it's not likely to escape, but just want to make sure it stays where it's supposed to, inside the phyllo dough. Almost done here. And some of these little dry pieces, if they fall off, just throw them away. It's okay. Okay, I've got everything folded over, and before I start laying on the new leaves of phyllo, I just want to make sure I go around the edge here and just butter folds I've just made, especially around the edges. And with my brush, work everything away from the side, folding it even a little extra with the aid of the butter brush. Okay, Now we're ready for the next set of phyllo leaves. But before I get started, I want to do something that's going to save me some time. And that is, I want to cut this to size. This is just a little bigger than my pan, and this will save me some trouble with the trimming and that kind of thing. So I just slip my pan over the remaining 10 layers of phyllo, the remaining half of a pound, and I'm going to just cut along here, just about to size. I need a fairly sharp knife, and this will do just fine. All right. Now what I want to do is kind of reverse the order. These first 5 sheets that I'm going to put on top of the filling, I want to sprinkle them with walnuts. So here goes one sheet, and it gets buttered. And a sprinkling of walnuts. And the second sheet, I'm just going to keep doing this until I do 5 sheets that are separated with both butter and walnuts. All right, this is my last sheet that's going to have nuts. And you may have noticed that I had a little thicker nut layer for the bottom, and that was purposeful. I did that because that will keep the bottom from getting too soggy with the syrup. So the top layers separated by nuts are just have a lighter nut layer. This is getting down to not too much, but it's okay. And that's the last of my nuts. Spread it about. And now I'm just going to finish up the normal routine. Phyllo, butter, phyllo, butter. Getting close to the end. I had I think maybe 7 or 8 phyllo leaves left that just received butter, and that's just fine, because what that means is the top will be really nice and crispy. And my last layer, and it's not a perfect layer, and it's okay because I'm going to put so much butter on, no one will ever know that it wasn't a perfect layer. Now here's where you really want to pour on the butter. You want to make sure that every bit of this phyllo is covered with butter, especially the edges and corners, because that makes it so much easier when you go to trim off the excess dough. So I'm just going wild here with the butter. Okay, now it's time for me to trim this. And all I need to do is really just trim off the excess phyllo dough that's just been built up in the corners here. So I'm just going to hang on to it with my thumb and take a sharp little knife and trim the excess off. Because I cut the phyllo to the size of the pan, I don't have too much to worry about here. I can neaten it up a bit if I want, or just forget it. But the one thing I don't want to do is I don't want to cut into the filling. So just the edges, just whittle them away, and that's it. Now I need to score this. I want to cut through just the first 2 or 3 layers of phyllo so that I have a sense of what my portions are going to be. And it's hard. Sometimes every once in a while you accidentally poke through and get a little bit of filling, but that should be the exception. It should not be the rule. And if you can't manage all the way to the end, that doesn't matter either. I'm just eyeballing this, but if you want to be very precise, you can get out a ruler. almost done. This takes a little bit of time. The hardest part is being light on the knife. You have to dig in enough to cut, but you can't cut too far in. Okay, I'm done. Now I need to bake this. The pumpkin pie needs to bake in a 350-degree oven for at least 50 to 60 minutes, and the top should be nice and golden brown. I'll check it after 50, but I think it'll probably be done closer to 60 minutes. In it goes. It's been an hour, and the phyllo is just a wonderful golden brown. This is done. I'm going to take it out of the oven now. I let the pumpkin pie cool for just about 15 minutes. And now I'm going to pour the syrup over it. Just try to get it as evenly as possible. Well, there's nothing more I can do now. I need to just leave this alone and let it soak. Probably at least 4 hours. Overnight would be fine too. Well, it's been several hours and the syrup is all soaked up. All I did was I went back with a knife and cut through everything. And now I'm ready to serve my first piece of Glyki Kolokithopita. Now, that's something special for your Thanksgiving.